Welcome to the root of all success with the real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs unlocked success and how their stories can help you do the same. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason has built multi-million-dollar businesses that have been featured in Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur magazine. His life's mission now is helping entrepreneurs live what he calls #the exit lifestyle. Introducing TEDx speaker, mastermind leader, author, entrepreneur, cigar aficionado, motorcycle enthusiast, and host of The Root of All Success, the real Jason Duncan. The real Jason Duncan.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the show. I am the real Jason Duncan. I'm going to be talking with Jerry Fetta today. Jerry Fetta is the founder and CEO of a company called Wealth Dynamics. And he's only 30 years old. And I say only 30. I mean, I'm only in my 40s, but what this guy has accomplished in these first 30 years of his life, which really have only happened in the last 12, is nothing short of phenomenal. He helps make finances simple, true, and applicable. And he's got this company, as I said, Wealth Dynamics, that's a financial firm that helps thousands of clients across the U.S. build wealth. And he has this passion for doing these three things with his clients, which he's going to talk about in the show today, which is financial education, becoming solvent, and creating greater financial freedom in life. He's married to his wife and business partner, Lexi, and together they have achieved financial independence by the time they reached 30. It's pretty phenomenal story. You're going to hear us talk about how he grew up in Alaska, and I'll ask him some weird questions about daylight and dark in Alaska. But he started out as a professional bodybuilder and then decided to get into the financial game, and that financial game has opened up an entirely new life for him. And you're going to hear him talk about his definition of success that most people on my show don't give. So pay attention to that when we get to that spot in the show. But without any further ado, please welcome Jerry Fetta to the root of all success. Well, Jerry, welcome to the show, my man.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be on today.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you because I'm always interested. Not only am I interested in successful entrepreneurs, which is what this show really is all about, but I'm always interested in talking about money, and because I'm so curious about people's money stories, how they create wealth, how they generate wealth, and what they're doing with the money once they get it. As a matter of fact, I posted on my socials yesterday an image that said, making money is the easy part. What you do with it is the hard part.
Yeah,
and so
I agree.
So I'm really interested to hear your story. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got your start as an entrepreneur? I mean, you're a 30-year-old dude. You're very successful. You're killing it. You and Lexi are doing a fantastic job, which I know we're going to get into all the details. But how did you start as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I got started actually at 18. I graduated high school. I grew up in Alaska. So I graduated high school. I was super into, bodybuilding. I was a competitive bodybuilder from the age of 16. And my thing was I was going to graduate and I was going to become a personal trainer and I was going to win Mr. Olympia, and that was going to be it. And so I got my job at the gym. I literally, I walked off the stage with my diploma and I went and did my first personal training session. And that was not a business, as a job, right? And so, long story short, I climbed up to the top as high as I could climb within 6 months and realized someone's either got to quit, die, or retire for me to go anywhere. Upward mobility just wasn't a thing there. And so, I had a friend that was like, you should check out, being like in financial services as a business owner and stuff. And I was not really interested in it, but I checked it out and I fell in love with, the concept of helping people with money. Very similar like trade-offs between that and fitness. Like there's a lot of like truth there that bleeds into both sides of it. But I also love the idea of like, doing it my way, like blazing my own trail. At a young age, like you don't know stuff yet. So my way is the right way. And that resounded with me. And so that's what got me into being an entrepreneur. So
Alaska, I got to ask, man, so you grew up in Alaska, what part of Alaska?
So I grew up in a town called Big Lake, super backwoods. I think my graduating class had 60 kids in it. I used to take my little Chevy Tracker off-roading in the woods. I smoked my first cigar when I was 16 years old. Like, it was that kind of place.
Where is Big Lake? What's that close to for those of us that don't really know everything about Alaska?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Alaska, the main city is Anchorage. There's a little thing you can do with your hand too. So this is like what the state looks like on a map, right? So you've got like Juneau down here. You've got like the Aleutian chain. Anchorage is like right here. That's the big city. And then Big Lake is like maybe an hour away from Anchorage, maybe hour and a half.
So how many hours of daylight did you have on any given day?
Dude, it's interesting. So in the wintertime, like right now, like if you were to go to Alaska, you probably have 16 hours a day of dark. The winter solstice is the darkest day, which is like around Christmas or New Year's. And I think that is like 19 or 20 hours a day of dark. But the summer it flips. So summer solstice, you've got 20 hours a day of daylight.
Wow. So what did you like better, more daylight or more dark?
Daylight for sure. I live in Florida now, so there's my answer.
Well, that was going to be my segue.
It was 20 years too much.
Yeah. So you lived there for a long time. You're like, I got to get out of this, man. I got to go back to 12-12.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta have a dark. So has nothing to do with entrepreneurship, but it's curious to me. I don't know many people from Alaska. So did you have like blackout shades in your bedrooms and stuff so that you could sleep because it's so light outside?
When I was a kid, so I was born in Montana. We moved up there when I was 5. And so I remember the first summer I was there, it was like impossible to sleep. Like you're a little kid, you're used to like it being dark and stuff. And so we had blackout shades in the summertime, and in the winters, it's already black. So you leave for work and it's dark. You come home and it's dark, and it's like it was never daylight in the first place if you didn't leave the office.
Oh my gosh! Well, so you escaped that. Now you're in sunny Tampa, Florida. Now bodybuilding. What got you into bodybuilding? Why was it just as a kid you did that for sports, and then you really liked it? How did you get into that?
Yeah, so I was a really skinny kid in school. So in middle school, high school, I was really into basketball. And so I wasn't strong enough to like shoot from long range with basketball. And so I had figured out like if I could make my triceps stronger, I could shoot better. So I started doing workouts and I just fell in love with it. And my team, in school, we were like a tiny school. And so we sucked. We lost all of our games. I was always a hard worker. So I would work my ass off at practice. And then we would just go get beat up, whether this was football and basketball. It was the same thing across the board. With bodybuilding, when I put in the work, I saw the result. And there wasn't this, if somebody else didn't work hard, it impacted me. And so I really fell in love with that part of it. And then I saw too, like the direct physical transformation. I went from being, 120 pounds and skinny to 160 pounds and competing in bodybuilding shows. And that was, something I could look at it, be like, I know how I did that. And it was something I had a lot of control over.
So is it fair to say that you were pretty passionate about bodybuilding at that time?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that would probably be an understatement even.
Well, what's funny about this show is I've interviewed a couple of very successful entrepreneurs like you who also had similar stories about being the skinny little kid and went into bodybuilding. But I have not interviewed a big meatball. Like I've not interviewed that guy who was always the big guy and got into bodybuilding. So what's interesting is I've interviewed guys that are on the smaller side of the scale who decided I want to do this because I want to bulk up. So I don't know. I don't know what that means for entrepreneurship, but that's the folks I've interviewed on here. But so you went from bodybuilding into maybe the gym. You thought I'm going to get into the gym space. Mm-hmm. Didn't work out. Who was the first person that said financial industries to you that you might want to consider that, Jerry?
So it was actually my bodybuilding coach. He was in financial services. And so he was like, hey, this is something I think you should check out. I think you'd be good at it. Now I grew up poor, so it wasn't something I had on my radar. I wasn't interested in finances. Like I had more bad stories with finances than I could count. So it wasn't something where I was like, yeah, let me go learn about this. But I trusted him. So I went to his office. I checked out the company and what they were doing. And I didn't understand a lot of it, but I saw solutions, right? Like they were very focused on like, here's how you get out of debt. Here's how you increase income. Here's how you invest. Investing to me was like a foreign language. Like it wasn't something I ever imagined in my life I would be doing. So I liked the help aspect of it. And it had a lot of parallels with the gym too. So I could see, lose weight, you got to burn more than you eat, to save money, you got to earn more than you spend. And I saw some of those things. I was like, okay, I think I could get on board with this.
So your bodybuilding coach, ironically, is the person who led you out of bodybuilding as a potential career. you go into investing. So did you originally, I know you've had your own firm now, Dynamics, right? So when you started, obviously you didn't go build your own firm. Did you go work for a brokerage firm? Is that, and feel free to share the name if you want, but is that what you did? Is that you just went to work, got trained under them?
Yeah. So I got licensed and trained. I worked for a pretty large national company, got my licensing, got my training. And, when you get into the industry, especially with finances, I call it retail. There's a lot of like the normal stuff that the everyday American hears about, the 401k plan, the mutual funds, all that. So that's really where I got taught, coming from a place where it was like when I was 9 years old, like all in the same summer, we lost our house, car got repoed, mom and dad got divorced, and we're homeless. So I'm learning about mutual funds now, and I'm like, what? Like it's like the Matrix. It's totally different for me. So that's how I got started. And then as I started to explore and observe more and more in the finance world of like what else is out there, that's when I slowly evolved into my own firm, getting more into what I would call the alternative side now on what my company does today.
Homeless. How long were you guys homeless?
So it was for a summer. I did it a few times, not by choice, but so my mom and dad get divorced. I'm probably 8 or 9, right? So we went tent camping with my dad all summer, and I thought we were just camping. We actually didn't have a house, so we had nowhere to stay. So we were tent camping in Seward, Alaska, for about 2 or 3 months. And then my mom's house, same thing. So we were living in like a travel trailer, like a camper behind somebody's house. And when you're 8, you don't think about that. It's actually kind of cool. You're like, man, I get to camp. And then, as an adult, you look back on it, you're like, we were definitely homeless like that. We didn't have another place to go put our roof over our heads.
Well, perspective is such a valuable thing. I mean, your parents looking at that situation, probably had to be some of the worst times of their lives. Mm-hmm. And yet their kids like you. Do you have siblings? Did you have siblings?
Yeah. I had 2 brothers. Yeah.
So you and your brothers, you're looking at like, this is the biggest adventure of my life. This is awesome. We'll get to tent camp. We'll get to live at a camper. And like, this is awesome. So perspective is such a weird, interesting thing, isn't it? When we look at the same situation from a different perspective, different point of view, it can really change everything. How much do you think that mindset and that perspective issue plays into success with money?
I think it is everything, right? Everything comes down to viewpoint. How do I see something? And viewpoint comes down to, our own thoughts and our own, ability to look at things to make them into what we need them to be. Reality is a very subjective thing. And so with finances, that's one of the main issues people can run into is they have this idea that it's this very firm, decided upon structural thing. And it's like, well, no, money is just an idea. The dollars that we earn, they're not actually backed by anything. They're printed into existence. Like it's a very fluid thing. And so when I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, if it's that, fluid, excuse my dogs back here. Well, if it's that fluid, it's something that I want to be able to decide, here's how it's going to work. Here's how I'm going to grow my income. Here's how I'm going to grow my business. So there's a lot there that with entrepreneurs, with finances, we kind of get that because we get to create it on the front end. When I was an employee and I had a job, it wasn't as much that way because I didn't see how the money was made. I didn't see the decisions that were being made to create it.
So a lot of people grow up in homes like yours where they live hand to mouth and they maybe even homeless as you experienced. And then that I guess the pattern continues to be repeated for the next generation. So the kids in that situation who are tent camping or homeless end up growing up and being also homeless and very little impact on society, living hand to mouth, W-2 earners who are not making any money and, whatever. Why do you think some people like you rise above that and others don't?
I think it's a disagreement with the situation. When I looked at it, like as a kid, like I didn't understand how it all happens. As an adult, when I started looking at it and learning about finances, especially, and that was a big step, even deciding I'm going to go learn. Right. And I think that's really the spark that kicks it off is someone can have, whether it's a financial situation or it's a family situation or a health situation, something bad happens, a non-optimum situation comes up and I can look at that and say, okay, this is my story now and I feel bad about it and it sucks and that's my life. And then I perpetuate that. Or I can say that doesn't seem quite right. Like, because I can look around and see that not everyone's going through that. There are people that have money. There are people that are in good physical condition. There are people that have good relationships. What do they know that I don't? That's where it starts. And I had that same mindset. I think this comes down to the individual, person to person. I had that same mindset with the gym. I was a skinny kid. I couldn't shoot the ball. And I was like, there are people that can shoot. What do they have that I don't? Instead of quitting basketball, I figured out, what do they have that I don't? Let me go work on that. If they can do it, I can do it. And I think that's the mindset difference there is if they can do it, I can do it. And then actually following through on that.
So mindset, you said that a couple of times. We've talked about that. I feel like that comes up a lot on my show, is this idea of mindset. And I love what you said, that it was a disagreement with the situation. So many people just accept their situation as this is reality. And that really, in fact, is a mindset, isn't it? I mean, it's a way you accept, like, this is what we're dealing with. This is who I am. But you grew beyond that. What do you think, besides the disagreement, besides the key, the fact that you had a mindset shift, were there other keys that led you out of that besides those two things?
I think bodybuilding helped a lot. That was something where, there's mindset involved in that too. But if we step out of that part of it, I know if I worked in the gym, I was going to see results. I know if I followed my diet, I was going to see results. For me, I was to the point where I would measure my food. If I was going to eat chicken, it went on a scale first. I knew exactly how many ounces and grams it was going to be. So there was a lot of preparation and passion that went into like just getting all of that lined out to be successful at it. And with finances, it's a lot of the same stuff. You don't have to be as intense. I think the intensity is from one person to the other, but the practices, be willing to put in the work, be willing to go the extra mile, be willing to, know your metrics, with the food, for example, be willing to plan ahead and prepare. It doesn't matter what you apply that to, that's going to be successful. And I did that from the age of 16. I still do it today. I don't compete, but those habits have stuck with me.
So you at 18, 19, you decided to go into bodybuilding, the gym, all that, but you shifted into financial services. How old were you when you made that shift?
So I shifted at 18. Yeah. So I
18.
I literally graduated, and then I went to the gym, and I was there for about 6 months, and I got promoted from entry level to the head personal trainer of the entire gym. At first I was like, this is badass. Like, I'm the top guy. And then I realized, like, I'm 18. Like, there's people that are like 70 working here. I can't be the head personal trainer till I'm 70. Like, where am I going to go?
Early. You peaked too early, man. Okay. So at 18, you make a shift into the financial services. You're 12 years into that journey now as a 30-year-old. You started Wealth Dynamics. What year?
Wealth Dynamics, we started the LLC in 2016 or 2017.
Okay. So 6 years ago. And when did so you've authored 2 books, How to Create Wealth and The Blueprint to Financial Freedom. Which one was first? Was the Blueprint book the first one?
So How to Create Wealth was the first one. I published that, I think, in 2018. And then Blueprint to Financial Freedom was the second one, which I published in 2020. And then I actually wrote a third one, which is more of a journal. It's a financial habit journal. It's called the Big 3 Challenge. And it just gets people, doing some of those daily activities and turning those into routines.
Okay. I didn't know about that. So the Big 3 Challenge, which is you called it a financial journal?
Yep, exactly.
Well, that sounds interesting. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I think I've got a copy. Let me grab it here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this one, really, it comes down to, three main behaviors that need to happen every day. So, like, for example, on a page here, you'll see in the morning or afternoon, whenever someone does this, the first thing they should do is they should check off that they did something to learn about money. And so we have, a triangle on the top of the page. They'll check off each point. First one is, did I do some kind of financial education or training today? Second point is, did I do something additional to earn income today? So not did I earn income, did I do something extra, right? And it's not even did I earn it, it's did I put in the activity. And then the third one is, did I account for my expenses? And if someone does those 3 things every day, there's a lot of other stuff you can and should do, but at a very basic level, if you learn about money for 10 minutes, you do something extra to go the extra mile to earn income, and you look at where your money went for the day, that behavior is going to build wealth. And you can supplement that, and you can do all sorts of other things. But if that's missing, there's not a tool or investment out there that I can give you that's going to replace that.
So in How to Create Wealth, you talk about something called the 40% rule. What is that?
Yeah, so this one is really cool. So historically, when you look back at the top 1%, they save about 40% of their gross income. And so that's what I teach my clients to do. That's what I started striving to do early on, was if I could just do that one thing. To me, that seemed like the linchpin, right? Like, you can earn income, and I've met people that do very well at that. You can invest. I've met people that do very well at that. But if I'm not saving so that I can invest, there's nothing to invest. And that saving has to come off the top. So when I looked at, there's a chart that I saw. When I looked at this chart, it showed from 1913 through till today. And it showed the wealth classes, and it showed the top 1% saving about 40% on average. But I would also see these dips. And the dips were things like the Great Depression, the 1950s recession, the tech bubble, the mortgage crisis. And so what you would actually see on the chart is during economic booms and expansion, the 1% were saving. So they weren't getting involved. Like if you've read, I think 2 or 3 years ago, Warren Buffett came out saying he had like $120 billion in cash or something like that, just sitting on the sideline. And that was during a really good economic period. When it came down, the depression happened in 1930. You see that the savings rate of the top 1% not only dropped, but it went into the negative. Like they were actually borrowing money. And so that's showing like you make hay while the sun shines. You stack the money up and save it during those good times. And then the bad time, everything goes on sale. And you want to be the guy that's there with the resources and assets to go buy those things.
So what do you think about Robert Kiyosaki saying savers are losers, based on what you're talking about then?
I have a love-hate relationship with Kiyosaki. He's very successful. And I don't even think it's his fault. The same thing can happen with a Grant Cardone or whoever. They're doing a video. People don't have the full context. So we read something in a book, we see something on social media, and we don't get the full picture. Obviously, Robert Kiyosaki probably saves money. I would bet money that if you went and checked his company out, he's got reserves. But what he's saying don't save for no reason. Like don't leave the money in the bank. And so I teach people it's not just what you make, it's what you keep, right? But it's not just what you keep, it's where you keep it and why you're keeping it there. And so if I'm saving for the purpose of investing, then that's a great thing. That's literally how wealth is built. If I'm saving without a purpose and I'm putting it in a bank account where they're going to loan it out and invest it anyways, and they're going to pay me nothing, then that's not a wise financial move. That's retail financial consumerism is what I would call that. I'm going to the financial drive-through rather than actually handling my business.
"40 years ago, you weren't in business unless you had your business in the yellow pages." You remember those things? And 30 years ago, you weren't in business unless you had a door-to-door salesman. 20 years ago, you weren't in business unless you had a website. And today, you're not in business unless you're doing social media content. Am I right? Social media content. social media content in the form of like micro content, which is 30 to 60-second spots on Instagram Reels or TikTok or YouTube Shorts. That's the way business is done. As a matter of fact, that may be how you found out about this podcast or me as a business coach. This medium that we're using today to communicate what we do is vitally important. And just recording yourself isn't enough. You've got to do it right. And my friends over at Story do it right. And one of the problems with doing it wrong is that you sit around thinking, well, what the heck am I going to record? What am I going to say? How am I going to say it? Like, I don't know what to talk about. Well, Story takes all of that away from you. Stop wasting time trying to come up with content, because Story will send you a video prompt on what to record. You can pick the categories you want to record in, whether it's real estate, entrepreneurship, finance, relationship, leadership, life insurance. It could be anything. Don't waste time on that. And by the way, if you're not confident in talking on video, or if the video editing portion takes up way too much of your time, Story will edit the videos to perform well on social media. They add the subtitles, the pop-ups, the zoom cuts. They remove all the filler words like and and. They remove the awkward pauses. And then they take that video and post it for you. They write the captions, they add the relevant hashtags, and they post it on the platforms that you care about the most. It's exactly what you need to be in business today and to be successful at it. So if you want to learn how to do social media the way the influencers do, you need to go to therealjasonduncan.com/story. And that's story with 2 Y's. Why? Because they're awesome. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/story. That's STORYY for 10% off your first 3 months to try Story out. You're going to thank me later. Yeah, I mean, you can't save your way to wealth. Saving that, there has to be intent and purpose behind it. Where do you recommend? I know this is not a financial advice show, but generally speaking, if somebody's going to put 40% of their income aside for the purpose of investing, do you recommend a certain type of vehicle to have that sitting in?
Yeah, so there's 3 places I like for that. So I would like to put it for myself. I do a lot of high early cash value life insurance. For me, it's safer than a bank. I'm getting a higher return, but I can actually borrow against it. So I can have my money growing and be able to use it and kind of double dip on the interest. I am big on gold as well, physical gold. It's a real tangible asset. That's another one you can borrow against. People don't realize that that's an option there. And then the third one I like is real estate. Real estate is a little bit less liquid. There's higher holding costs. So that's usually not a starting point that I'll tell people to go into. But it is a great place to store value. And so, for me, rather than saving, I like to think of it as that I'm storing value. Just like if I'm storing food in the fridge, like I need that place to keep the goods fine until I'm ready to use them. Same thing with money, right? So that's my big 3 that I like to use.
Life insurance, gold, and real estate. Very interesting. So I'm with you on 2 of those. I'm not into gold at all. Doesn't mean I don't like it. I'm just not there. But for sure, life insurance, and for listeners to this show, they know that that's one of the things I talk about. It's this little known thing that most people don't understand about this cash value life insurance that can be
cool, huh?
The most amazing storage place for money in the world. And yes, it is a little difficult to understand at times. And if you don't keep in it, you don't understand how this all works. But and then, of course, real estate. I mean, if you look at the Forbes 500 top richest people in the world, or Forbes list of richest people in the world, what you'll find is that those people, real estate and business ownership, that's how they made their money. And so I think that's really, really interesting. So what would you say was your biggest key to success, building wealth dynamics, becoming financially independent by the time you're 30 years old? What was your biggest key to success?
Man, the biggest key, it comes down to, like, if I had to put it into one, and this is going to be really general, but it comes down to people. Right. And that can be, you can look at that from a number of different standpoints. Obviously, if I'm trying to grow a company, there's people, there's my end user. That's who I'm marketing to. That's who I'm selling. That's who I'm serving. When I'm staffing up, that's also people. Right. In the last year, we've done a lot of just getting our executive team in place. And that's like, a whole new level of people. It's not just normal. I need someone to do this task. It's like, I need someone to help me plan and strategize. So people has been a huge thing for me. And I think, for me growing up in Alaska, it's a pretty unpopulated state. So the entire state, it was 700,000 people. And so I've had this different viewpoint on people because there wasn't that many of them. Like it wasn't like you can go to LA or Miami or, New York, Chicago, or all these metropolis kind of areas. We didn't have that up there. Anchorage was the biggest city. We had 300,000 people in it. And that's, almost half the state in one location. So the idea for me was that I needed to go find people. I needed to leave and go find people. And so that was something that I think not everyone always gets, because we grow up, with the same people we went to school with, and we've got the, family that we've known all of our lives. And sometimes we kind of keep with the same crew. When you're growing, that can be a hindrance. Not to say you won't have some loyal buddies, but you have to reach out and get new people in your life. And the best way to do that, I think, is through business ownership. If you really get that, you can get in front of and talk to a lot of people.
How do you define the word success?
So success for me is the achievement of what I set out to do, whatever that might be. And that's also not a one-time event. There always has to be the next game. And so I'll have big games, like, things that, I might not ever achieve them my entire life, but I'm sure as hell going to try. Right. And I've got, stuff that this week and today I've got to get done. And so, it's that, did I set out to do it? And did I get it done? And if I did, that's success. So
by that definition, which I 100% agree with, because that in fact is the literal definition of success. Most people who I ask on this show never do that. But by that definition, do you consider yourself to be a successful person?
I do. I had this realization, I think this was in 2019, right? Like, I was sitting there and I was like working on my business and doing some personal development stuff. And I realized, like, literally at that point in my life, everything I had decided to do, I'd done. And what happens as an entrepreneur, you probably see this too, Jason, is we get these times where it doesn't go quite right, or the setback happens, or the whatever happens. Mm-hmm. And we can dwell on those, right? Like, and it's never not going to happen. Like I'm 30, I've got another good 50 years of life left. At least there's going to be a ton of those things that come up. But at the end of the day, it's, did I quit? And if I didn't quit and I actually kept going and I achieved the thing, then I succeeded, and the setback's just part of the story. So for me, that was very validating. I'm not super into the touchy-feely, self-validate kind of stuff, but that was a moment where I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm still going to be hard on myself. I'm still going to push myself, but I know I have done all the things I tried to do so far.
Well, congratulations on your success. So tell me a little bit about your perspective on something in the 401k, because I know you write about that in your book.
Yeah.
And the 401k, good idea, bad idea. What do you think?
So the 401k is interesting. A lot of people think that this is it's like a thing, like a house, like you have like this, like very concrete, solid thing. The 401k literally is a piece of tax code. That's all it is. So in the late 1970s, a guy named Ted Benna, he created this idea of the 401k by using IRS legislature that just said, hey, you can defer compensation. Like, this is a thing that's allowed. It's called deferred compensation. So he set up the 401k plan with his own company, and it was an internal thing just for his employees. Wall Street got their hands on it, and so they basically turned it into this very marketed product, and they needed an exit out of pensions at the same time. Because, these larger companies, they committed to paying people income for the rest of their lives without thinking about how they were going to get the money to do that. So they looked we need to be able to jump into something that puts the responsibility on the employee rather than the employer. So we went from pension to 401k. So all that backstory to say basically a 401k is just a tax code. It's actually a form of trust. You can set up a trust that can be a pension trust, a retirement trust, a charitable trust, an estate planning trust. There's a lot of trusts out there. And so a lot of times people think of the 401k as like a financial investment, and it's just that. So you got to look at, what does it do, right? And so when you put money into a 401k, you're getting a tax deduction on the front end. Sounds good. Money goes into the account, but if Wall Street set that plan up, you're only able to pick what makes them money. That's the first point to realize is for the next 30 years, Wall Street's going to have my money. I'm not a big fan of Wall Street. When I look at all the history, like it's a group of criminals that they lobby enough politicians not to get in trouble for the things that they do. So I'm not really into giving them the money. And then when I pull the money out, I'm going to pay taxes. Now, here's just the simple thing I look at, Jason. If I'm 30 and let's say I pull this money out when I'm 60, do you personally think taxes are going to be higher or lower when I'm 60?
Well, I guess that all depends on who we elect as our next president. No, they're going to be higher. They're going to be higher.
Yeah. And usually taxes, if you look at the compounding annual growth rate of our taxes, sure, there's up and down periods, but they increased by about 1.65% per year since 1913. So we can apply that same thing and say in the future that might be where it's at. We're borrowing more money. We have a lot of reasons taxes will go up. Now, the other factor is inflation. So inflation is going to be higher as well. So the cost of living in 30 years will be more expensive than it is today. And so what that means is I'm going to have to withdraw more money out of that account at a higher tax rate. So it's a larger dollar amount multiplied by a higher percentage of taxes. If you do the math on that, the back end taxes I pay actually tend to outweigh the deduction I get on the front ends.
Mm-hmm. So moral of the story, bad idea.
Bad idea. Yeah, I'm not into it. You can make it work if you self-direct it, and there's some strategies you can do to take more control, but it still comes down to that.
Yeah. Well, anytime the government comes up with some plan to take our money from us and let us, quote, invest it because they're going to take care of us, it's going to be a bad idea. Social Security, 401ks, anything the government ordains as a plan to save us money in the future is probably not a good idea. Mm-hmm. And, if we can't see that, and there's something wrong with us. One of the chapters in your book, How to Create Wealth, you wrote how not to pay your taxes and get away with it. What are you talking about there?
So that's just good old tax planning, right? So another thing that people don't realize, like, do you remember when was this 2020 or 2021, and not to get political at all. This is just what happened is Trump had that thing where his tax returns came out. People were like, he paid barely anything. And there was that big fuss about it. Really, anyone could do that, right? So the tax code, it's about 5,000 or 6,000 pages in length. Only about 0.50% of it has to do with the paying of taxes, which means all the rest of it is clarifications, incentives, deductions, credits, like ways to legally not pay taxes. So, like an example, I own a tax firm. It's called Tax Kraken. And so we have a client in California. He brings in about $850,000 in adjusted gross income. And so he's paying a ton of tax. He's probably paying more than half of that in taxes between state and federal, right? So we were able to look at his taxes and actually do a proactive tax plan. Key is proactive. You got to do this in that tax year before that tax year ends. And we were able to cut his taxable income from $850,000 down to $250,000. He's going to go from a $200,000-$300,000 tax bill to maybe he'll crack six figures on the tax bill, but he's probably going to be lower than that. So it's just good tax planning, understanding the code, understanding the solutions, and applying those.
Yeah, this would be a good time to plug my Entrepreneur Master Series. I don't know when this episode is going to release. We're recording this in November, but I do this webinar series, and I bring on experts to talk about different things. And my one on January the 11th is going to be 5 strategies to not pay taxes that you don't owe the government. Because I 100%, Jerry, I'm with you. I mean, I believe there's this lot of talk and news and politics about fair share. And usually it's the left telling the right they got to pay their fair share, or the rich or the poor telling the rich, or whatever it is. It's always one group against the other telling, hey, you got to pay your fair share. Well, the reality is, if we want to look at what paying the fair share means, is really only what is required and not a cent more. And as you said, most of the tax code is designed to show us as business owners how not to pay taxes. Like there are ways, and they're not loopholes. It's a legal remedy to an issue. And if you overpay the taxes, they ain't going to give it back. Like I'm a walking example of that. I overpaid the state of Tennessee $90,000 in sales tax several years ago. And we've been trying to get that back ever since, and they won't give it back to us. So you don't pay more than you should. Well, so Jerry, tell me a little bit about Wealth Dynamics as a firm and what you guys specialize in.
Yeah, so we focus on 3 really big things. I would say maybe 4 really big things with people. The first one is financial education. And you mentioned with your webinar series and the masterclass, like that's one that never leaves you. Like, like the gym. Like I can't be like, I already worked out. Like, but I need to do it again tomorrow, right? So especially as you grow your income and as you grow your net worth, the necessity for financial education increases. And the fact is we were never taught any of it. So we spend a lot of time teaching people about not just the basics, but how does money actually work? How do the top 1% build wealth? What are the historical strategies that we can use that actually do, have better results than what we're seeing with banks and Wall Street and IRS? So that's a big part. The second one is solvency. A lot of people skip this step. Especially as business owners, like we don't always tend to get our financial houses organized. And so it's important to have, reserves. It's important to have your liabilities covered. It's important not to have, debt that doesn't pay you. I just look at that as consumer debt. It's important to have that basis and that foundation. And so we walk with people and get them through that. And the third one is then just achieving greater financial freedom. So we help with everything from, life insurance to tax planning to investing, setting up trusts, setting up estate plans, working with people and actually building real wealth, but not doing it through the retail means. So we're not working with banks. We're not working with Wall Street. We're not giving money to the IRS. And that's really one of the main things we focus on. Our fourth thing is we want people to share the truth about money with others. And that's why I love this podcast and what you're doing is that's what you're doing is like you get to the top. And this has always been my philosophy. It's like, you've got to tell other people how to get there. Like, I technically, I guess you don't have to, but it's the right thing. Like why not tell other people if you know this stuff? And so that's part of what we do as well.
I love it. So financial freedom, that's a weird phrase because I think it's tossed around a lot. Financial freedom, financial independence, et cetera. How do you define that phrase?
Yeah, so this is one that I had to look at because I hear it so often. And so we help people achieve greater financial freedom. And I look at that as a gradient scale. There's more or less, right? So certain financial behaviors are going to restrict me financially. Certain behaviors are going to give me less limitations in my life. And so the greater of that would be like, finances are a means to an end. So if I want to live abundantly and prosperously, it's going to take money to do that. And that's like, can I do something without thinking about money? And to the degree that I can, I'm financially free. And it's free from having to think about finances. You could achieve the same thing with being homeless, but you don't have all the same freedoms in life. So the idea is that if I do that through abundance, if I want to eat organic, for me, there was a point in my life where I couldn't. Now I can. I don't have to think about the cost of that. I'm not at the point where I could fly private yet. If I wanted to, I would think about that cost. And that means that to that degree, I'm not financially free yet. So that's kind of my definition of that.
And financial independence, loosely defined as having passive income that exceeds your needs on a month-to-month basis. And according to what I talked about in the intro, is that you and Lexi have achieved that before you turn 30. And how many young people in their 20s, they struggle, but you figured it out. How do you think you figured it out? What was the secret to figuring that out?
I had to go study old, dead, successful people is what it came down to. I did a lot of studying. So I was a financial advisor, right? And I got all the licenses and I passed all the tests. And all of that told me that the government said I knew about money and finances. And I was allowed to give advice and sell different products and services. There were certain times I would meet with people where they were already financially independent. And they had no interest in what I was offering. They didn't want the mutual funds. They didn't want the annuity. And oftentimes they understood it better than I was trying to explain it to them. And so it only took a couple of those times before I was like, okay, what are they doing? Like, I need to figure out, because again, something is missing. And so I need to go figure it out. If they can do it, I can do it. Kind of like I said at the very beginning here. So, I spent years like reading biographies of people like, John Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, JP Morgan, the Vanderbilts, learning about banking, learning about, like old money practices and habits. And I started to see some commonalities. And like you said, there's business, there's real estate, there's life insurance. The life insurance one is the funniest. I was a Dave Ramsey guy, so I thought whole life insurance was the actual devil. You're in Tennessee, so you know exactly what I mean. So I was an endorsed local provider for investing in like 8 states.
Really? Oh, not anymore.
Not anymore. The first time I saw a correctly designed whole life insurance policy, I was like, you're shitting me. Like I was looking at an actual unicorn. I was like, there's no way this is real. But the ironic thing with that is when you study like who invests in that, the number one owner and purchaser of that type of life insurance are the largest banks in America. Right. So you start looking at this stuff. That's how I figured it out, was just studying successful people. But my requirement was they had to be old, established, and preferably dead. So I don't study Elon Musk because he might still mess it up. Right. I love Jeff Bezos, but he's still got, another 20 years. We'll see what happens. I can go learn from somebody like Rockefeller because that story's done and told, and I can see from point A to point Z and all the details in between. So that was a big part. And a lot of that too was also sequence and timing. Like, when do you do certain things? Just because it's a good idea doesn't mean I should do it right now. And that's a big focus of what we teach our clients too.
Well, so Wealth Dynamics, and that's spelled WealthDynamx. So Wealth Dynamics. So Jerry, if people are listening to this show and they're like, I like this guy, man, this guy's got it figured out. I'd like to connect with him. How would they best connect with you?
So you can go to our website, wealthdynamics.com. If you're on social, we're on all of them. We're the most active on TikTok and probably Instagram. So if you just find me, Jerry Fetta, just my first and last name on TikTok and on Instagram, and you can connect with me there. We're good at messaging back. So if you like a video, you comment, you message, we'll usually hit you back and answer your questions.
So is your Instagram handle just Jerry Fetta? Just spell it all out?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, just
so
my name.
JerryFetta. So Jerry Fetta. Go look Jerry Fetta up on TikTok and Instagram. You can check out Wealth Dynamics, and that's DYNAMX.com. Go check him out there. So Jerry, as we finish up the show, I like to give you as the guest the final word to give some advice or pep talk to the entrepreneurs out there that are in the struggle. They're trying to figure it out. You figured it out. So many people have figured it out, but they haven't. What's your word of advice or tip to them?
Yeah, if you're an entrepreneur, like I meet with people sometimes that are 50, 60 years old, they're business owners, right? And the company's been the main asset. And if you're especially my age, it's going to be for a while. It's always going to be a thing, and you're always going to have that there. Plan for other assets, like take money from the company, put that into real estate, put that into different things. And I'm not saying don't invest and don't put money into marketing, but you should have a percentage of profit that goes aside for that stuff. And what that does is it gives you the ability to, have some other sources of wealth and income. But what I've realized too is it gives you the ability to really be creative in your company. Like the power you have when you don't have to do something for money, you can just be creative because you want to. You can just grow your business because it's your passion. I'd never heard that talked about until I started to experience it. And it was like, it's a freedom, it's another degree of financial freedom. So that would be my pep talk, is build that and get there, because that's an amazing place to be.
I love it. Well, Jerry, thank you for being on the show, man. It's been an honor to meet you. We need to get together sometime and smoke a cigar and talk a little bit more about money. So thanks for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Well, there you have it. Another very successful entrepreneur about his journey to success. And even though at 30 years old, even as young as that is, look how much success this guy's achieved. He and his wife, Lexi, financial independence by the time they're 30. He's continuing to help people all over the country build and maintain wealth and spend it the right way. He's written 2 books. You ought to check those books. Well, actually 3. We learned about the third one on the show today. The Blueprint to Financial Freedom, How to Create Wealth, and then the Big 3 Challenge, which is a financial journal, which I really like that concept where you ask yourself these 3 questions every single day about your finances. But I want you to pay attention to what he said. One of the keys to success that he shared on the show today was people. And he talked about growing up in Alaska with only 700,000 people in that state, living in the city of, close to 300,000. Just there weren't as many people he had access to as there are in Chicago or New York or LA or Miami. People is one of the main keys to success. And if you've listened to the show, you're a faithful listener, there are 5 keys to success. And that third one that I talk about is people, knowing the right people. And you can see in his story, knowing those right people, his bodybuilder, his trainer, hey, you ought to get into the financial business, changed his life forever. I want you to go check out Wealth Dynamics. Check out Jerry Fetta on TikTok and Instagram, Jerry Fetta, that's Fetta. But people like this are what make this show so interesting. And I love doing this show. But thank you for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to the show, please go do that. And remember, this is on YouTube and it's on every podcast player out there. We're proud to be syndicated by the C-Suite Radio Network. So big shout out to those guys. And I thank you for listening. I appreciate you leaving reviews and subscribing. It means a lot to me, and it pushes us further up in the algorithm so that we can get more people to listen to the show and hear these phenomenal stories about success. So please tune in again next week when I talk with yet another very successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. And until then, I'm the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at @TheRealJasonDuncan. Are you an entrepreneur who feels trapped in the weeds of daily operations, not experiencing the freedom you thought you'd have as a business owner? Want to know the way out? Take Jason's free exit readiness assessment to see how close you are to getting ready to experience true freedom and success as an entrepreneur. Go to amireadytoexit.com today. That's amireadytoexit.com. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.